Hello and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. I'm super excited today. I'm joined by Patrick Waits, who is the founder of Coltech Global. We're going to be talking about a number of topics today, from coaching, creating a winning mindset and formula within a recruitment business, to opening up a US office and exceeding UK billings. But I want to let Patrick do the introduction. Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself and your story in recruitment.
Thanks, Charles. Firstly, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Without going too deeply into sort of my backstory, introduction, started in recruitment 15 years ago, maybe 13 years ago, 2011. Joined the business as many others do. Stumbled into recruitment. A friend of mine was working at the company. They was offering a referral scheme if you brought any friends in or if you knew anyone. He promised to split the referral fee with me if I get a job. Still owes me. Still owes me on that one. And didn't start off very great. Took a lot, learned a lot. Like, took a long time to sort of get on my feet and understand what I'm doing and why we're doing it, and what it means to actually do the job. I thought it was just call us to people, say a pitch, and then hopefully someone's going to say yes. So didn't have the greatest of starts, and then penny sort of dropped to about 18 months in, and then sort of accelerated from there. Done really well with that business. Moved to a second company to open up a sort of a new desk for them. That sort of went well. After about 18 months there, I decided that it's if I'm doing well for these other companies, potentially it's a good idea to do it on my own. And 5 years ago, I founded Coltech, and from there we've expanded from a loft room above a gym in Brentwood to to where we are today, and office in London and an office in Austin, and plans to exceed that and keep growing across the United States, especially to become one of the most well-known brands in the industry. So that's a little bit of an introduction to me.
Awesome. So just before we get cracking, I think what would be quite useful for listeners is to just have a very brief idea of the markets that you've worked in and what the split is between contract and perm as well.
So contract through and through, always worked contract. So before I started Coltech, I think it was like 6-7 years in recruitment. Never done a perm deal. I hadn't done a perm deal until we started doing the US, and then we decided to only do perm in the US, which is a great idea.
Wow.
No, well, it was not a good idea. It is a good idea, but I'd never done perm, so it was a bit of a culture shock to me in terms of how things move and how to go about that. So really and truly out and out contract recruiter. Always done initially sort of in the infrastructure space. It's always been larger projects, so technology or legacy transformations. And then, as that's expanded, Coltech, we cover cloud, data, and software engineering, and it's all based around, it's contract only, if you will, but all project teams and what we describe capability as a service. So rapid response teams, virtual bench, or project delivery. So that's a bit of an idea about what we do.
Awesome. Yeah, because I always think whenever I listen to recruitment podcasts, the market, like recruitment's recruitment at the end of the day, right? And I've done a little bit of contract and predominantly perm, but sometimes if I listen to someone from one specific market, there's some nuances and differences. So I think it's quite important to have a bit of an understanding about that. But when we first met last week, we spoke a lot about the importance of coaching, and since you set your business up, you talked a little bit in detail about the importance of coaching and how that has accelerated the growth of your organization, and how you have got essentially like brand new people in the recruitment industry and you've seen them work along their journey to become real high performers. So I guess I'll leave the floor to you, Patrick. Talk to me, like what is we'll start off with why you think coaching ultimately is so important.
Well, I think it's fundamental, isn't it, to success. No one comes out. So let's go back to when I first started, all them years ago, maybe it's 12, 13, 15, whatever it was, 2011. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and the business I went into probably didn't have enough time or didn't have the setup initially to really sort of have someone doing like full on coaching training with you. Then, you know, it's growing quite rapidly. And everyone was just sort of, you come in, and this is probably the same for any company 10 plus years ago, probably even 3 years ago, 5 years ago. You know, you work in sort of L&D and coaching yourself, so you know the sort of it's had a bit of a rise, more of a rise over the last 5 years or so than before. Businesses, again, you just come in and do your job, and either you're good at it or you're not, and then it's just a revolving door. So that was certainly the camp that I was put in at when I first started, and it was, here's a list of people, you do testing, go. So it was, I just really didn't understand what I was doing. There's KPIs, what was they for? Why was I hitting these things? Like if I was getting X amount of manager names a day, get X amount of pitches, book X amount of meetings. It's like, okay, but I understand what I'm booking the meetings for, and understand that I've got to have these calls, but like, there's little point in adding some managers, if that makes sense. There's got to be like an ideal client or the type of person that you want to get. It's just like, oh, just speak to test managers, for instance, and then you're hiring adding like test managers from Lloyd's, HSBC, wherever. It's businesses that you're probably not going to have the best opportunity of getting into to start off with. So it was just understanding that. So I didn't have any of that. So it took me a lot longer. So then as I moved into my second business, they had a massive L&D function, and I saw a lot more around the process, how people coming in. So I was at my first company for like 6 years, and done really, really well, just because of how things were. But going back to that, it wasn't. I then got taken under the wing of one of the owners of the business, one of the founders, and that was more like mentorship than coaching. It's sort of like, worked really, really closely with him, Siri. Worked very, very closely. Went on meetings with him. Watched how he would do stuff, and then sort of replicate that basically. And then it would be, he'd take all the meetings and I'd never say anything, which was probably with the better meetings that we had. And then I'd slowly but surely I'd start, you know, dropping in and saying fast, and then I'd start running the meetings. And then it's all right, that's how I know how to do that. How we're handling sort of the larger projects that we were doing and how to pitch those. So the training or the coaching I had in my first business was very much more sort of get on with it, and then over a period of time sort of got taken under wing of someone and sort of developed. But it wasn't ever sort of sit in a classroom, this is how to do a pitch, these are the objection handles, this is that. It was sort of just learning through osmosis, which was all right. And, you know, we ended up doing really well as a business. The business sort of skyrocketed, and, you know, because we changed the model slightly into doing project teams and so on and so forth. But yeah, the next business I went to was much more, there's a real setup. When people join, there is a training program. You go on an academy, you do this, you know, these are the steps that you take. There are daily, like classroom based training, and then, you know, listening to role plays and everything else, which I wasn't used to. And that business has a real good reputation for bringing people through and growing, and it's, you know, it's grown really well. So going back to the actual initial question, the importance of coaching is it's twofold. So I think that you can have coaching in terms of like, you know, your more traditional L&D of sitting there, and this is the sort of the theory of how to do things.
Yeah. And
this is a script. This is how to break down a call. This is like an intro, open questions, summarize. This is the structure. You have to have that. But it's really important to have sort of on-desk coaching and people to look up to and people to learn from. So you have to have a mixture of the both. So without that, you know, it's going to be difficult, because, you know, it's the same with anything. You can know how to the theory around how to swing a golf club, but until you keep practicing and seeing people do it and learning from other people, you're not going to learn how to play golf just from reading a book. So I think it's important for businesses to have leadership that is following a process, is doing certain things, is working in that way, and is able to show that and leading from the front. That's really important to me, that I'm still, you know, very much leading from the front and working as part of the with the team, going on meetings with them, doing the pitches and everything else, because we can sit in a classroom. I can give you, we've got a sales playbook. I can give you that. This is how to do it. But unless someone actually sees it in practice, it becomes very difficult to learn and very difficult to improve yourself, because you have to be doing it on a daily basis. So coaching's just fundamental to success. Rafa Nadal still got a coach. Cristiano Ronaldo still got one, no matter what. So you have to be learning and training every day. Otherwise, you're not gonna develop. So that's my thoughts.
100% agree with you, and your story is similar kind of to me, to be honest. I started off in contract recruitment. It was nursing, so it wasn't necessarily like project based or overly technical. You speak to a band 5 RGN and it's a simple case of, what hospital do you work at? Do you want to work for this hospital for double the money? Sweet, come into the office, we'll do your compliance, we'll get you shifts. It was very, very basic in that respect. But when I first joined, I guess, I don't know if people are like this these days, but for me, like, yes, I wanted to progress. Yes, I wanted to develop, but that wasn't really the most important thing for 22-year-old Charles. The most important thing for me at the time was earning as much money as I can, because I still lived at home with mum. Most young people, they want to do that. And in recruitment, you never really heard a lot about L&D and company offering training and stuff. And 2 years into the job, I was flying. I was one of the top billers there. I was loving life. But you hit a glass ceiling and you feel like, I'm kind of doing this with my eyes closed. I'm essentially just managing my contractors right now, my nurses, and we're winning a couple of new projects here and there, but like, wasn't really developing much. And then when I got into perm recruitment, they had a like an external L&D consultant that used to come in like once a fortnight, once a month, and it was quite alien to me. So it sounds similar to you when you had like formal training and stuff, like having someone sit by my side and going like how are you going to do your emails and what's your cold call intro and stuff like that. I was like, this is so like new to me to have someone to support me and stuff. But going back to your point, I think this is so important for so many businesses, especially businesses that are in a stage of growth and they've got money in the bank and they want to grow. You have to have leaders within the business, and it has to come from the very top down, where there is a coaching culture and a mentoring culture. I think it's so important to have like a senior consultant that goes out of their way to help new people in the business, to say, especially if you have the tech stack, listen to the call I've just made. What have you noticed from that? Take some, write down some notes about that. Like, let's listen back to your call. What questions did you use there? Why do you think the hiring manager hung up on you, et cetera, et cetera? So I think it's just so important for any business that wants to grow, for sure.
100%. It's got to be a repeatable model. So like in the first business that I was in, we done extremely well in terms of like, there was lots of people, but it was for a relatively small company. The contractors that we had out, the contract people's billions that we had, there was a lot of people like north of 10k weekly GP. This is back in, some people was like, a few of us up to like near 20. So there was like a real good core group, but that wasn't necessarily, and this is a difference as well. This is another thing that wasn't necessarily because everyone was trained really, really well, or there was an exact structure around how we were. In fact, there was not. There was a bit, obviously, but it wasn't. As when I went into the second business, how regimented was. This is, you do this, then this, then this. Like, it was sort of, we'd go out, we found a niche, we'd go out, speak to clients. It was as simple as just go and pitch and win work and bring it back and we'll deliver it. Like, it was, there weren't much more to it than that. We just maybe not naturally talented, but we was all really, really hardworking. And I think when you have a mixture of really hardworking people that all want to succeed and have a decent sort of pitch and a decent sell, it, quite quickly can grow. And then as people, because you want to succeed as well, the competitiveness comes into it. So once one person gets to 10k, and it's like, well, that's the benchmark. So let me beat that right now to get to 15. So that was what was really great in my first business. There was a culture of work really, really hard. Everyone wanted to be the top biller, and everyone, we was really close, but really competitive with each other as well. And the second business, the really good thing about there was, again, there was a competitiveness, and people wanted to work hard. Obviously, it's a bit of a prerequisite, really, if you work in recruitment. But there was a process in place that you could see that, right, once someone comes in, and this is something we're going to talk about, but once someone comes in from wet behind the ears, I know nothing, there's a path that you can take them down to get them to, I know what I'm talking about, and I can start billing semi-regularly and then regularly moving from there. Whereas that wasn't there. It was come in and you're either going to make it or not. Whereas it's a bit more predictable when you've got that repeatable model. So That's why the training and having that process. And I'm sure, like you said, when in the business, when you had the L&D person come in and sit with you, and you started to understand a little bit more around what he was doing, and it was probably things that he was doing actually naturally. But then when you break it down, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And you can sort of tick different boxes off. So the most important part around that for me, around L&D or training, is being able to show that there is a process to work to, or there is steps that can be done. And then here's the sort of the tool belt that you can use. Use these things, and then as people develop and you get more senior or they get more experience, they're going to gravitate to one way of working more than something else. But when as a starter, then everyone should sort of be working in the same way. And if you can get that model working, that's how you then be able to bring people in, train them up, and get them up and billing quicker than if you're in and saying, right, let's see what happens. This guy might work, or this girl may work. Oh, and if it doesn't, and then if you've got the process in place and the L&D, you don't even need an L&D function. We don't have one. But if you have that an understanding of the process of ways of working, then you can really make sense. Like you can actually make sense of why people haven't worked out.
Yeah, you can break it down, can't you? Like, is it a case that they just don't have the work ethic? Is it a case that they weren't a cultural fit? Is it a case that they weren't picking things up quick enough? They weren't good at building relationships? They didn't have the sales acumen? There's a few things there. But
is it that our process is shit? Is it like what we're asking people to do isn't right?
Yeah.
So if we've hired 10 people and 7 of them don't work out, it's probably something to do with us.
Yeah.
And so that helps you then refine your onboarding process, your training, like what you're doing, what you're offering, what you're offering to people when they walk through the door, what expectations you have. Because it might be that my expectation is I want everyone to be on, if you're contract, 5K weekly GP in 8 months. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to do that. So then if you set your expectations so high and no one's ever done it, it's like, well, actually, we're probably putting a bit too much pressure on people to begin with. Or, on the flip side, oh yeah, we don't really want anyone. It's fine. We can do without people doing a deal for 6 months or whatever. So, well, maybe that's a bit too long. And then you get to a point 6 months down the road, if someone had, so babbling on a little bit, but if you understand what your processes are and what your expectations are, and that all comes down to your structure, and then from that builds on to how to coach people in the right way.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you said a second ago, you said about your first business, it was very much a case of, because there wasn't necessarily like a formal process or structure, you end up having a lot of people coming in, and because there is no defined process or training or coaching or anything like that, you do get a lot of people that come in and they just don't make it. And I was one of the, I don't want to say the lucky ones, but I was one of the few people that did make it. And I remember one of my first companies in recruitment, we saw dozens of people get hired a week and dozens of people get fired a week. People that couldn't make it past week one because we were expecting them to make hundreds of candidate calls and place hundreds of candidates and stuff, but they didn't know how to even qualify a bloody nurse because there was no structure, there was no playbook, there was nothing. And I always say, like, going into businesses now, and when I was in L&D, you have to break it down to 3 things, right? You start off with training, the theory. So if you want to be a footballer, you have to understand the theory. If you want to be a recruiter, you have to understand the theory about the basics. Once you understand the theory, then you have to actually action it. And that's where the coaching comes in. So if you're fortunate enough to have an L&D person, or if it is just your manager or your director doing the coaching, that coaching will look like, I don't know, call coaching, or simply after each and every call or every other call, how did that call go? Let's break it down together. And then you have the management and the mentoring. So, managing things like KPIs, which some people demonize. I think they're so vital. It just depends on how you sort of manage them. And then the mentoring from other people and from sort of leadership. So you have training, theory, coaching, managing, mentoring. And if a company has got that, you can scale. If you can't, I think it's kind of almost like luck with who you have in your business.
Yeah. And that's not a good place to be. Just luck and hoping for the best. I totally agree. Totally agree. We've gone through a lot of that as a business. I don't sometimes think that people come onto these podcasts, even myself included, and talk about how great they are and how wonderful everything is in their business. It's not. It's really hard at the moment for anyone in the industry. Anyone that you speak to, you might have a few different cases that are the exception, that have absolutely skyrocketed in the last year or whatever else. But the majority of businesses, the reality is that the times are tough, and you
Mm,
make wrong decisions, and you at times move away from what you're. So you might have businesses, right? But we spoke about this when we first chatted as well,
mm,
around the businesses that would have hired loads of people 21, 22,
mm,
and everyone's shit hot because they've come in and the market is, we've said, like the saying, that the fish were jumping in the boat slightly.
mm,
You didn't have to be that great. So all of a sudden, your processes go out the window a little bit, because it's like, we're amazing as a business because everyone that we hire has come in and has absolutely smashed it. And then the market drops off as much as it did back in the 2022,
mhm,
2023, even moving more into this year. Now all of a sudden, everyone's shit, we're shit, our processes are shit, I don't know what's going on. But it's like, if you would have
mm,
just stayed when the times are really, really good
mm,
and stuck to your principles, that's probably where a lot of the companies that have skyrocketed over the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever, have just always stuck to the
mm.
same thing, stuck to the
Yeah.
same principles, stuck to the same work ethic, and stuck to that, that structure.
Mm,
So I think what you'll find is, and yeah, it's gone off topic a little bit, but you have to, if you've got a model that works, no matter, my point is, no matter how good the market is or bad the market is, if you've got
mm,
something that works in the market, it works before things started booming, then stick to that. Don't abandon it all of a sudden when things are really good because it's easy,
mm.
because then the people that you've brought in who think they're amazing and you think are amazing because they've built X amount of money, because, say, if you send a CV, you're probably going to get an interview. Um,
It
then
was like that.
yeah, and things all of a sudden change. So I think we're probably one of the biggest culprits of that. There was,
Mm,
we had a real good structure. Things got really, really good. We thought we could walk on water, and all of a sudden you realise, oh no, we probably can't. And then
mm,
you go through iterating the change, and that's why this, like, the subjects that we're talking about today, 1% better, coaching, how to scale a business from the ground up or whatever it is, and improve, getting people to become high performers, is so important to me, because we probably
mm,
lost a little bit of that for a period of time because things become easy.
mm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember when I was the L&D manager at my last company, and I was seeing people literally sneeze and pull 4 jobs, and recruiters with zero experience doing like 50, 60, 100K months. And I'd never seen anything like it. And then when the market slightly, well, it essentially almost crashed pretty much, a lot of companies were making redundancies and all the rest of it. You kind of dive into their process and you're like, oh, you actually don't have a process. Like you're not even speaking to some of these hiring managers. It's yeah, it was a bit of a mess. Before we move on to the next topic, the last question I wanted to ask you, in and around coaching, as a business owner, if you have one, what's your sort of process around coaching people? Because I know you've got some stories of taking people from almost no experience in recruitment to literally none, to getting them to high performing. What would you say is your kind of process for actual coaching?
So obviously you've got like the process, sort of everything else we could talk about in terms of how to go about doing things. But I think the best, and you mentioned earlier, like the on desk coaching, right? And
Mm,
when people first start, so you're going to have to, like, and again, I'm in a privileged position, maybe, but some people might consider it privilege, some people might not. Of I'm still on the desk, very much hands on, still working with the team, so I can see things and
mm,
spot it and be like, catching people doing something really good,
mm,
or catching them doing something not so great, and being able to say, right, that was brilliant, do that again, or
mm,
we could improve on it like this, or being in a position where someone doesn't know how to handle a certain situation, or an email comes in, or a client says it, like something. It's like, right, let's say this now. And also, I've got really,
mm,
really hands on
mm,
in terms of how, and when people first start, especially. And I think that sometimes, it's a bit of a funny way of putting it, but sometimes leaders will either, I consider myself quite a lot still a billing manager in a lot of ways,
mm,
because I'm still very hands-on, working with the team to bring in clients. And I think that you'll find that sometimes you'll get someone that's a biller move into a management role, and then sort of like they either just solely only want to focus on what they're doing,
mm,
or get too engraved in what other people are doing, and then no one ends up doing anything because you just
mm.
messing around. So my to actually answer the question, my method of coaching, what I found to be the most most successful for me, is again hands-on, leading from the front. So people can see you. You're in the meetings with them. They can see how you conduct a meeting. You help them take a job spec to start off with, and then you sort of slowly drip feed into things so they can start doing it themselves. And then everyone then becomes you to the power of four, rather than you sort of split over trying to do everything for everyone. So and then again that will then leads on, so that when the next person comes in, the next group comes in, those people can then train those people in the same way. So it just becomes so the repeatable model. But my idea of what a good coach is someone that can spot things there and then and bring them up on desk. Not afraid to not going to pull any punches when it comes to giving feedback. It doesn't mean you're going to beat everyone up every time they jump off a call, but it's like, right, this is where it needs to be. And I think that me personally, I always reacted better when I was just people were straightforward with me. I think being straight down the line, not trying to sugarcoat things, telling people this is what needs to improve, or that was fantastic, keep doing that. Because then if you give him praise, it means more. Because they know it's genuine. It's genuine praise. I think that some of the times there's people that give praise like when it's not due, just to sort of cheer someone up, which is is fair enough. But then I was always like, with my the person who sort of I really learnt from the most, my first boss. If he said well done to me, I knew I'd done something really, really good. So it's like making sure that you give him praise for the right stuff is really important. And so we've managed to get there's some people who've come in here more recently and hit some really good numbers really quickly, because we said we had that blip after during the good times, and then a little bit afterwards, like we didn't really know what we was doing as a business. We wasn't able to bring people through as quickly as we thought we could. So we put these models in, built the sales playbook, built the processes, and sort of worked people to that. And from there, people have we've done really well.
Yeah, nice.
Hopefully I answered the question. I didn't just say a load of stuff.
No, you definitely did. And I like that. And I think there's not enough recruitment business owners that are hands-on like that. I think a lot of people, when they start up their own recruitment business, the goal is obviously, they want to sell it in 5 to 10 years, and they want to kind of be more hands-off and all the rest of it. But then they sometimes, kind of similar to what you just said there, is they either just go fully managing someone and then just don't bill, or they're just completely hands-off or whatever. And I feel like if you're running a business or you're a manager, you need to be like deeply invested in what your guys are doing. And something for me when I was a manager, and because I was learning NLP at the time, and I had to do like live coaching sessions in front of a big group of people. And the one bit of feedback I always used to get from the facilitator was, because I'm quite a chatty person, right? Was, Charles, you're always keen to give advice. You're always keen to tell people what the answer is. Shut up and ask a question, because he was like, you're very good at asking questions. Because when I got into perm recruitment, we used to have this massive poster on the wall that said all the starts of open questions. So I just mastered open questions. So when I was doing like these live coaching sessions and live management sessions in front of this big group of people, I would know the answer in my head. I would know what they'd done wrong, but then I would just say, what do you think you could have improved? Okay, what else could you have improved? All right, finally, what else, if anything, could you have improved? And then bang, then they get the answer. And for me, as now I'm in L&D, like that's when the magic happens. When that person goes, actually, maybe what I could have done is asked this instead. That's where the real learning happens. It's so easy as a business owner, as a manager, as a coach, to sit there and say, right, you need to do this next time. Because when I used to get people saying, you need to do that, it kind of frustrated me, because I'm just sometimes, especially when you're in recruitment, right, you get a bit of an ego. And there was going to be a scenario I was going to explain to you as well, that because I've done martial arts for like 15 plus years, when I was doing like a sparring session, sometimes I'd be a little bit cocky and have my hands down. And sometimes the coach would always come over to me and say, like, Charlie, you're going to get hit. You need to get that right hand up. You need to get that left hand up. And I'm like, Wayne, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'll be fine. And then one time I threw like a really sloppy kick, really, really sloppy. And I was sparring this guy who was 6'7". I'm like 5'10". And he caught me flush in the face with a head kick. And we had the recordings and everything like that. And the coach came over to me and was like, what happened? And I was just like, I was tired. I saw there's 10 seconds left on the clock. And instead of like just gritting out the last 10 seconds, I thought, okay, I'm just going to throw a spinning back kick. And he was like, and what happened? I was like, I got a head kick. What are you going to do next? I'm not going to do that with 10 seconds to go. I'm going to make sure I set up this, that, and the other. Do you think I ever threw a sloppy kick in sparring ever
Yeah.
again? No chance.
I suppose it probably helped that you got kicked right in the head afterwards. I don't think we're allowed to do that. There's been times, but it's explaining the scenario and understanding why things went wrong, and that's been a big problem for me. Massive, giving people the answers. I even spoke about earlier, like say now, say this, now say this, and you don't learn, and this is the problem, that you get super successful. I'm not putting myself in that category, but you get successful billers, successful leaders, whatever it is. Let's just not even take it as founder. We could take it as like someone like me. You've come in, you've obviously started a company because you're reasonably good at what you do, in most cases. And then you want to bring people in. Again, you have such high expectations because it's like, well, forgetting, like in my point, it took me 8 months to do a deal in my first place. You'd start, right, come in, I expect people to do this, and that's it. And then you end up just doing the job for them. Because you're so invested in, you want to make sure that they're successful. One, because you want people to work for you to be successful. Two, you don't want to look like a dick that you just hired someone and had to sack them. And there's a bit of ego behind it as well in yourself. So you want it to be successful. So really, you're just doing the job for them. Then they might bring in a couple of clients and do some deals, and then that's when people plateau or go backwards because they don't actually have the fundamental skills or the basics of doing, or they don't know why they're doing stuff. I spoke about that at the beginning, where it was like, add these managers, get these references, do these pitches. Why? Why am I doing that? I never really thought as to why I was, and maybe that's me just being stupid, but I never thought as to why it was important to get these amount of manager notes. I never thought why it was important to get these leads so you can chase them. How do I go about chasing them? Just ring them non-stop? Is there other ways? I don't think I sent a spec email out for the first 18 months that I worked. That's why I'm so against them. But we spoke about that before. But getting people to understand the reasons why, and that's obviously like we mentioned there with the spinning back kick or whatever else. Why did that scenario? How did you get yourself into that scenario? Oh, well, it's because of this, and this. All right, cool. So what are you going to do? Well, I'm not going to do that again. Asking people to, and then people feel like they're more competent.
Yeah.
And that's where confidence comes from. If you feel like you're competent at something or you're good at something, you get more confident in doing it.
Yeah.
If you're being told all the time what to do, you then just think, I need to ask all the time what to do. I need to always be asking someone, what should I do now? What should I do now? I'll go to Pat or go to whoever because he's got all the answers. It's like, you've got the answers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a big point that I've learned, is that sort of sometimes you've got to be like, well, what would you do?
Yeah. It's such a powerful question as well. And do you know what? It really empowered me as like a junior perm recruitment consultant when I would ask my MD or my manager, like, what do you think I should do in this scenario? How should I reply to this email? And they would just smile at me and go, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I think this, that, and the other, but I don't know if that's the right thing. Give it a try. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you do it. And then if you get like a bad response from the client, they go, great, you've learned. If you get a good response, you go, great, you got a job to work. You're like, oh, so all of a sudden I've started to like learn that I can do this by myself. And I noticed this when I first became a manager because I would get people asking me questions. And again, my biggest learning thing when I was doing my coaching qualifications was I used to tell people what the answer was. And then I started to foster a culture in my team of people that always had to ask me. And I'm not really overly a perfectionist, but I definitely have part of my personality that wants things to be done really well. So I would always have guys send me their emails first and stuff. And in the end, I was like, actually, I'm going to then just develop a team of people that constantly have to ask me what the right answer is. And they're not developing themselves.
Well, yeah.
They're just
Also,
doing it my way.
As the manager or as the leader, you've got to that position because you're, again, if you start a business or you're a manager or whatever, you're obviously relatively good at what you do. Your strength or where you're most useful is by doing the job. You're not an email monitor. You're not, these are the things that's not your job. Your job is to go out and lead from the front. So of course, if someone says, can you help me with this a little bit? You're going to, right? But they're going to learn so much more hearing you on the phone or saying to them, right, come in this meeting with me. I'm going to jump in this meeting with you. Or, right, let's chase this lead together. How are you going to go about doing that? Then every email they send you read through. I mean, look, we're all guilty of it. I still am now. I'll still be like, right, what have you written there? Get away. But you're more my use to people is either jumping on a call with them, or them hearing me, or them coming into a meeting with me, or whatever it is, because they'll see how the types of questions you ask, or the way you structure your conversation, much more than, again, if someone asked me to write an email, they're probably barking up the wrong tree anyway. I can't spell to save my life. I even spelled my name wrong on this thing. Have you? That's
I'm not much better, don't worry.
It's just my fat fingers and the thing. But yeah, but that's what I mean. Like being actually doing the job, seeing people. If you're sitting there and you've got a team of 5, 6, however many people have in their bidding manager or their managers having a team, and you're constantly writing emails to people.
It's not sustainable.
Here's an idea: stick it into ChatGTP and get on with it. It's true.
Not wrong.
There's like, and we spoke about this. Like, if someone's just specking out emails constantly, well, I could probably get some sort of automation. In fact, I definitely can, to do that job. So, what value are you giving? What are you bringing to the business, but also to your clients? If all you're going to do is every time a job comes in, mail shot. Obviously, you mail shot the database or whatever else, but you're going to do that, or every time you're to get work, all you're going to do is just send a big mail shot and hope that something comes in. Definitely get some sort of automation to do that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, we'll revisit that at the end of the show in terms of what the biggest sort of takeaways are from the coaching piece. But something we spoke about when we first met last week was, and you mentioned this at the start of the show, going and branching out into the US market and predominantly doing perm. But it sounds like your US team over in Austin are absolutely just smashing it at the moment. And I know a lot of people that I speak to are looking to branch out to the US. I met with someone earlier this morning who is starting a business and doesn't know whether to start in the UK or the US market. Obviously, there's pros and cons of either. I guess from your standpoint, just briefly, what have been the best things that have happened since starting up the US function, and what have been like the biggest learns that you've had since doing the US function?
There's been loads of learning curve, massive. It's been a steep learning curve from the start. So as I mentioned, always been contract. When we started the US business, we was like, right, let's do contract. The way contract works in the US is different to the UK. It's the same, but there's, umbrella companies. You have to, they have to be a W-2 employee. So there's service charges to go on top. That comes out of your margin. So if some, just for easy, because my maths is pony as well as my spelling. If you have somebody who wants $100 an hour, the actual cost to you is 120 because of the service charge you have to put on. Right. So that's something I had to work out with the margins it was making with the client. And then we just thought, well, actually, the notice period is at will in the US anyway. Max people are going to give it 2 weeks. And, 25+% is not irregular in perm, and the salaries are really high. So 100 in 2021 or 2022 when we sort of first setting it out, 200k was for a software engineer was pretty standard. So you're looking at it and going, hang on a minute, we get like 50k a deal here. Why am I messing about the contract? Like, I didn't like, so we that was the idea, go out and do perm. And we've done really well. Like, there's no, like, we started very strong. But again, as I said, fish were kind of jumping into the boat a little bit. And we thought that, so we built the business from here, and we had the team here in the UK, and the idea was to get them up, incubate the team here, get them to a certain level, and then move them out. What started happening is where markets was changing. We moved some people from that was UK focused to the US. They never really had a plan or a desire to move out to America, and it wasn't. We just started putting square pegs into round holes quite a lot to sort of retain people within the business. So that was a learning curve in terms of, if you're going to get people here to go out there. One of the problems we had was that I didn't plan it out properly. I didn't say, right, how much money are we going to need in the bank, or how are we actually going to fund this? Or how are we going to know, is it recurring revenue, or like, because we didn't have recurring revenue, it's perm. How much money are we going to need? So there's a target, and then once we've got that, I've never done that. It's sort of just like, once we're bidding, we'll go out there. Again, this is a lot of the time I've done things. Throw my shoulders, like, let's just give it a go. But that was a problem, because if you've got people in the UK working US hours from the UK is difficult. I was lucky. I got a young family, so I got to spend time with my son before I went to work every day. So I was good with that. But it is, you don't get to see people because you're working till 11:30 in the office. So you don't have a social life during the week. So that is really hard. So you have to just working hours in general. Like honestly, you can leave in the office at like 11:30 or like midnight on a cold Tuesday in the city, getting out and walking down back to the station, and it's just not fun. But so the target, so that you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. We didn't have that. We ended up getting it. So that's a massive learning curve for us there. I think we changed quite a lot. Again, this is going back to what I mentioned. When times are good, we was like, yeah, it's always going to be this good. And it was like, well, actually, things are getting a bit tighter. Right, what are we actually doing? Because again, fish jumping into the boat, you're just sending CVs out, going like you're picking up work quite easily. So then it's like, so we changed the model a couple of times of what we was working to, which again, I wouldn't advise. I'd say get a plan, stick to it. What's your offering? Why is it good for the market? And if that's the case, it's probably going to be good for the market in any market that you're in, good or bad, because what you're offering is, you've deemed it to be worthwhile. What we was doing is really just chasing the money because I just wanted to get out to Austin as quickly as possible. Whatever way is going to bring you money, just do it. So that all changed sort of back in middle of last year. Unfortunately, 2 people that was going to come out to Austin we didn't take them in the end. They're now out there working for another business, and yeah, good luck to them. But becoming restructured it, brought someone in, and then that's when we went contract only, and then that's where it skyrocketed from there. In the last 12 months, we've built the book to a really good level. We've got an office out there now. We hired Americans this time, that's citizens. I've been out there a lot more, working with the team in person and so on and so forth. So that's worked really well for us. Would I hire a UK team again to ship out there? Yeah, I would. It's not to say that it's a terrible idea because 90% of businesses have done it. I just think we wasn't ready to. We didn't have the right plan. So if I'm going to advise anyone who's setting up in the US, or any business in general, but just say setting up the US from the UK, understand the working hours are not great. They might seem fun at the beginning. They're not. Just simple things like, I don't know. Actually, it's quite a touch. I did have to put the kids to bed. It's always a fun time in my house. But no, I'm joking. No, I did not get in to see my family in the evenings. Like my wife, I didn't really get to spend much time with her because we're like ships in the night. So you have to understand that that's a sacrifice that you're going to have to make. Understand that the market is different. One thing I would say, and I probably was one of the a culprit of this, is thinking that just because you're doing the US market, you're going to make loads of money. It's not. There's like, you'll hear loads of different stories, like loads of different stats that there's 40,000 recruitment businesses in the UK and 60 million people ever, and there's 30,000 in the US and 360 million. So, much less. There's a much sparser market. It's much easier, much less competitive. The reality is, if you're doing tech, the majority of the businesses there's a lot of businesses in Austin. There's going to be a lot in New York. There's going to be a lot in the certain locations that you're going to want to go to. The competition's high. You can't walk down the road in Austin now, down Congress or whatever, without hearing a UK accent or seeing the floor that we're on in the industry. It's got about 6 or 7 different recruitment firms. So the idea that it's not as competitive is rubbish. The biggest advantage of it is the margins and the money that you can make are a lot more.
Yeah,
that's generally it. The process you have to go through, how you have to work, how you have to go and pick up clients is just as hard, just as competitive. It's just once you break into a client, you're probably going to make more money than you would in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I'd done US recruitment for probably 6 months or something like that. One of the guys in the office started doing the US stuff with the managing director. No one knew anything about it. We kept on saying we've got some great CVs for the first 3 months. They were like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, obviously resumes over there and things like that. Yeah. So we had no idea when we first started, and because I was one of the best business developers there, and I predominantly work retained, and I mainly done all new business. Everyone was like, "Why the hell aren't you doing the US stuff?" And I was like, "Well, I go to Thai boxing twice a week. I like to see my girlfriend. I want to go and see my friends, and I like having a social life. I like having that work-life balance." And then you see people doing US deals with their European customers, and it's like you said, it's like 40, 50K. I'm like, and this will be one of the last things we talk about like starting with a deal in mind. But there's two ways to look at that. But for me, I was blinded by the money, so I just dropped all my European business, gave that to someone else, started cold in the US, not knowing how to approach it. And every single tech business that I was speaking to had an internal recruitment function, and they didn't really work with externals, and it was trying to overcome that. And it was like 6 months of barely having any success. And I just remember thinking, I've just spent like 4 or 5 years building up my European desk, dropped it all, didn't really know what I was getting into. We had no one in the office that had really done it before. So it was so challenging. And back to what you said, I started doing US recruitment in October. So just as the clocks go forward or back or whatever it is. So, I was finishing work at like 11:30 and it's like -1 in the city of London. You're coming in to start your day whilst everyone's having lunch. And we used to work in a WeWork back when it was fun, where the drink taps were open from 3 until late. And they were all having beers downstairs on a Thursday. And I'm like eating my lunch at like 6 p.m. It was odd. So I guess from your perspective, anyone that's looking to start a US function or recruit in the US function, what would you say is like one or two things that they could do to really take advantage of that opportunity?
I think it's like, honestly, to be honest with you, Charles, I think it's like this the same as anyone doing any market. I was very similar to you on that. I've never done US before. The company obviously hadn't, because neither of us had done it. And it was very much just going cold and let's see what happens. But it would be no different if someone was starting in the European or UK market. I suppose one good thing that you could have potentially done, or which we didn't have either, but would be what crossover is there with our clients? Who do we work with in the UK that might have a US entity? What rate is there, any relationships there that we can leverage? But I think if you're take that as an assumption that you don't have that either, how to be successful in the US from a standing start is again not dissimilar to what you do in the UK. I would learn the terminology, resumes, not CVs, and there's a few different other bits and pieces around that. Learn that like if you're doing contract, learn how that works in terms of the service charges, W2, 1099, what works, what doesn't. And then it's just it's much more of a relationship based, I think. It's harder to get into that, not harder. It's hard to get into clients, but once you're in, you're in. So having that, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, not putting the deal first, not having just only having a deal in mind. Where am I going to do? Where am I going to deal? It's important to have that attitude. Obviously, you want to write business, but I think they sense that a lot more. It's much more of a service-based culture. Much more relationship-based culture. Like you go into any restaurant, everyone wants to be a best friend because it's tipping and so on and so forth. So let's start with a tipping mind, actually. It's a bad analogy, but it's much more of a relationship-based culture out there. So I would start with how we started was by offering value first, meetups, events, whatever it may be, expert interviews, and going from there. Not everyone's going to be able to do it. So I think it's just dancing around and saying lots of different things. But anyone that starts here from the UK to go out there, just to understand that it's a different market. It's not a silver bullet, and the processes that work here will more than likely work there. But you have to be a bit more based on service and value rather than, do you want this? Here's a resume. Do you want it? It's how are we going to go about solving that problem for you? But I'd give that advice to anyone who's in the UK, US, Europe either.
That makes an awful lot of sense, because I was quite fortunate that in my first couple of months doing the US market, I predominantly focused on San Francisco because that's where a lot of medical technology businesses were sort of founded from. I booked so many client meetings. I was so surprised, because doing it in the UK, my biggest objection was we don't want to work with recruiters. We've had terrible experiences with recruiters, which, I believed in the service, the value that I and my business offered. But going to the US and doing work out there, initially it was all cold. And then all my success in the US market came from my UK, European clients. But they were really open to meeting with me, albeit on a video call, and speaking with me. And a lot of the times I'd sit there with an HR director or, chief people officer, and they would say look, full transparency, we don't really work with recruiters. We haven't had to, but I liked your approach. We'd like to meet with you, and if there is a case that we can work with each other in the future, happy days. And I just remember going on to every call thinking they respect me, because so many times as a recruiter in the UK market, they just have no respect for you.
There's also a lot of it out there is that people want to they like to be sold to. Now, I mentioned it's a service-based culture. Everyone likes to, so you'll get a lot more meetings, you'll get a lot more conversations. You will, just because people are more open to talk. They're not as maybe rude as they are in the UK. They also like to see people do well. Again, unlike the UK in some cases, right? So the cultural thing there, and this is a big thing on the cultural thing. At least in the UK, if someone doesn't like you, you're going to know about it. If someone's not going to buy from you, you're going to know. A lot of the time in the US, you'll think, wow, I've just landed the biggest wow in the world. I've got this project, this is happening. And then you'll never hear from them again. Or it just won't happen. Oh, we haven't landed the funding with. So you have to be aware that there's a lot of people that like talking. There's a lot of people that will take a meeting or take a call with you just because. And you have to try and siphon that out a little bit and be aware that it'll probably take less meetings in the UK to win work, because usually if you book, or Europe, what we've experienced, if you book a meeting with someone, there's probably something there or a reason to speak. In the US, people will just meet you because why not? Just in case something happens in the future. So you have to be prepared for that. That's a big thing. A big piece of advice
nice.
That I would keep an eye out for.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense, especially a lot of the businesses I work with now as an external L&D person. They're either branching out into the US or expanding the US, and that's definitely a recurring thing. But look, the final topic before we wrap up was creating a winning formula. And you mentioned a lot about mastering the process and, not starting with the deal in mind, which I think there's two ways to look at it, right? Because I was always taught that you kind of, especially in contract nursing, was, I was so good at building relationships, but sometimes to my detriment, where I didn't think commercially. And then I would see some people that kind of work so commercially, but then forgot that you're dealing with people, and people have got families, emotions, and all the rest of it. But when you say about not having the deal at the forefront and completely mastering the process, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit when you were speaking earlier, but explain a little bit about that and ultimately what you mean by beginning with or not beginning with the deal in mind.
Yeah, again, it probably goes back to experiences that I've had personally in running the business more recently, in that it's deals. Where's your deal coming from? Which again, important question. And so what I don't want is people to come across as deals aren't important. They clearly are, because that's how we make money, right? But if you're only worried about the deal, where's that coming from? You'll do anything to get it. Not like unethically, but I mean in terms of the way you go about your work, you'll mail shot the whole database. Just I see that funny meme on LinkedIn the other day of coming towards the end of the month, you've not done a deal, and you just mail shot the whole database and hoping for the best. Again, which is only going to damage your reputation anyway. So it's understanding what process it is to get to business and making sure that you master that, because then the outcome should be business, should be a deal, should be a client. If you're baking a cake, I mean, I don't personally, but I presume if you was to bake a cake, there's ingredients that you need to put together to be able to get that right. You're not going to just let's just chuck a load of eggs in a bowl and hope for the best. Do you know what I mean? There has to be ways of going about it to be able to get to the outcome that you desire. So if you're just worried about the outcome, you're going to mess up the inputs or the ingredients, the steps that you need to do. That's what I mean by that. So when people join, it's like, right, we want to try and get to this figure. How to work backwards from there. Well, what's the first step to that? That is, we should be doing this amount of dials, for instance. We should be having this amount of conversations. And if these are the types of conversations. So once you've again mastered the steps, all of a sudden it becomes a repeatable model, which the deals are just then become a byproduct of you doing your normal day-to-day work. So I think that's important, because otherwise, if it's just right, deal, which again is important, but if that's what you're worried about, you're going to skip steps. You're going to miss things, which you might hit the target that month. Miraculously, you do a mail shot and someone says, yeah, we need 3 people. Oh yeah, this spec looks good. Can we take whatever? But you're going to have to do that again next month and next month and next month. And sooner or later, the market's going to slow down and you're not going to be in a position to be doing the deals, because all you've just done is just skip steps of the process. If you follow what you need to do all the time, you will get to that outcome, and it will be consistent because you'll win consistent work. And you'll understand, right? If I need to, what numbers, and we spoke about KPIs earlier, they're not something to beat someone with, but they are an indicator. They're a performance indicator. That is, it's clues in the name, but they are right. This is where you're dropping if you're falling down. If you follow the steps, then you'll be able to understand your data and understand where you need to improve, which goes back to your coaching. You'll be able to say, right, we've had 100 conversations or booked 2 meetings. Something's going on in those conversations where we're not either getting our services across properly, we're not finding a pain, we're not offering value. Let's train you on that. Okay, you've had 10 meetings and no projects have come off the back of that. There's probably something around the services or questions you're asking. You've won a load of work, but we're not paying you. It's very clear then to understand and pinpoint where you need to coach each person. So that's why it's important to me. So 1, have a process, 2, understand the numbers, and 3, make sure that we're following those 2 things to be able to get to the outcome. Because if you're only worried about the outcome, you're not going to be able to develop a really great business, because you have to have a map of how to get to the goal.
Love that. Do you know what else as well on that? I notice this a lot because now I'm external. I'm like an extension of recruitment businesses brand. I go into recruitment businesses now, and one of the key questions I ask consultants, and largely I work with companies that predominantly do perm, right? And they go, oh, I've got this guy here, Joe Bloggs. He's a fantastic fit for this job. And I'm like, okay, cool. What's his top 3 MITs? What's the top 3 most important things he's looking for in a new job? Progression, increase of salary, interest in tech. Cool. What does progression look like for him? He just wants to progress his career. Okay. What does that actually mean? Let me go and have a look at my notes. No, you should know. He's got a final interview next week. Like, you should know this. Okay. What salary increase? When he's on 100K, he's probably looking for. Okay, cool. And what's the final thing? And then they were, I don't know. I don't know. Look, he's a good fit for this job. He fits the brief on paper. Okay, cool. Why is he looking to leave his current company? I don't know. I just approached him and he was interested in this. Okay, so what's happening now is you've seen his profile, you've matched him up to the job, and you think it's a deal, but you don't even know why this candidate's looking to leave. You don't actually know what motivates this person. Again, it might not be
why is he going to say no?
What's he going to say if he gets counter-offered? If he's a contractor, is he going to get extended where he is? Is he able to leave his contract? Like, people don't ask these questions because they're afraid of asking the difficult questions, and they think, oh,
that's such a good point. Like, asking the questions you don't want to hear the answer to is something that no one does. Like, again, you'll just be caught up in a bubble. Like, we have it here, myself, everyone's done it over the years. Yeah, I've got these 3 jobs, and yes, done. Counting the commission. Right, how many other agencies are on it? Whatever, all the different, how many other interviews are there? Is it all these different questions that a lot of the time people don't answer because, again, they've got the deal in mind, and it's like, well, I've got these jobs, and do you know what I mean? It's you've failed in the process. So yeah, that's a really good point. Just asking questions that you don't want to hear the answer to will always help you get to the business. And we just said that just then. Why is this not going to happen? Don't tell me all the reasons it is, or the reason is because he's a really good candidate and they need someone. Okay, why is it not going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Well, his current company might counter offer him. Oh, he's got 3 other interviews that he's the perfect fit for. Mm-hmm. There's 4 other me's out there that are shopping him about, who all think that he's the number one for their job, you know. So why is that? And then that's another question to ask clients as well, you know, like when we're taking a spec or when we're talking about a project or we're talking about work that we're going to do. Why could this not happen? Is there, budget? Is there going to be budget constraints? Is there going to be, you've got other people that you're working with? Is it not fully signed off? You just want to get the person because you're actually going to use that person or these people to pitch that you need that you can deliver the project or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, find out why things aren't going to happen is super important.
Yeah, I always call them the bad news questions or hunting for the no. And I do that now when I meet a new client of mine. At the end of like the discovery call, I always say, like, look, full transparency, I'm very picky with who I work with. And if you're going to have an external L&D person, a coach come into your business, it's right that you need to be picky as well. From the initial conversation, what concerns do you have? Largely people go, oh no, it's all good. I feel like we get on. It's fine. Okay, cool. What, if anything, do you think could stop us working together? Oh, well, a bunch of the senior leaders are going to be on holiday in August and, we've got this happening and maybe this budget thing. And then you can unpack those things. And then largely a lot of it is like smoke screens and you can kind of understand whether you think this is actually going to move forward. But sometimes there'll be like a big thing Like when I first set my business up, one of the first clients, it was a recommendation from an old trainee. And I said, what do you think could stop us from working together? And he was like, well, I'm meeting somebody who has worked for one of our competitors and been in L&D for 15 years. So I'm going to go and speak with her. And then, depends on how that conversation goes. But if it goes well, I'll probably go with her. And immediately then I was like, well, you're not on my pipeline sheet anymore. It's probably ain't going to work. And that's fine, because then from my perspective, I'm like, well, I can just remove that from my like mental headspace and then free up some room to then go and focus on other businesses that are within my ICP.
How important is that to clear things out of your pipeline? Like it's a rhetorical question. Like, get things out. You'll have so many people sitting there like, oh yeah, we've got this coming up. Oh, if once they land their funding, they're going to hire 10 people. No, they're not. Like, how often does that happen? And it's like one of the things you've probably got to do when you go into businesses is get people to understand that the majority of the things people tell you are bullshit. Either they don't want to say no to you because they're just polite and they're just trying to lead you on. Two, they actually genuinely think themselves that this is going to happen. But a lot of the time when we're like, oh, they're kicking the can down the road. Like, they don't want to tell you no. It's just like, oh, we're waiting for our funding to come through. It's going to take 3 months. 3 months later, how'd you get on with that? Oh, yeah, no, not through yet. Call back. Do you know what I mean? And you've got that in the back. You've got people that consultants that are like, I've got X company that's coming in. It's like, no, it's never coming in. So give it up. That's a massive thing. Being clear and really critical of your own pipeline. Because then if it comes in, happy days. But also don't commit then. Oh yeah, 4 deals next month. They're going to hit their funding. Oh, what happened with X? Oh no, nothing, sorry.
Yeah.
But you've been banking on that the whole time. So you've got to deal in mind that that's going to happen. So you might take your foot off the gas a little bit because it's like, oh, I've got this work coming in. Or they give you a load of work and then all of a sudden, and this happens all the time as well. You work a job, client pulls it for some reason. But if you look back on the process at the beginning when you take the job spec or something they said in that time would have given you a clue that that was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I've just started working with a solo founder, set up his business very recently. And first time I met him was at a networking event, and he said, I've just won this client and they've got 100 sales jobs. And I was like, like he's just set up his business, 100 sales jobs. It's just him. And I was like, that's amazing. And then I've started working with him on a one-to-one coaching basis. And I've dissected it and I've asked some questions that, again, a coach should be asking, difficult questions. And we've actually realized that this account is crap. It's like the JDs. It's a company moving from America to the UK. All the benefits are all statutory minimum. There's nothing good. 5 days a week in the office. Salaries are just horrendously low. Fees are just a flat fee. It's really, really low. And again, the mental space in his head to then go out and win new business when he's got 100 new jobs working with this new business. It's like, hang on a minute, if we just clear that away, if you think you're going to be struggling and you don't have a team of resources to help you with this project, does it not make sense to go and work with other businesses that are more agile, that are paying the market rate, that are being flexible, that are offering good benefits, that isn't going to be horrendously difficult to find people for? And if you clear that mental space, and then win those other new jobs and new businesses, is that not going to make your life a lot better and make you more revenue? And we came to that conclusion a couple of weeks ago. It was like, oh my God, 400k pipeline. And actually, when you really break it down, it's not at all.
I get it all the time. And then I think that the problem is, as a salesperson at heart, you're always really optimistic about your own stuff. And that's like something that we'll sort of probably develop. And we've seen it in businesses that not people calling out each other's pipeline. But all it would take is someone on another desk to be like, what's going on with that? And then, like you say, someone external, not in the team or someone, to ask a couple of questions, and they find out that it's not. So that's a big thing, sort of like feedback between the teams and coaching. And then that helps as you grow as well, because then if it helps build that culture of, everyone wanting a coach and everyone wanting to each other to be successful and learning from each other. So it's pipeline, fake pipeline, or dream pipeline, if you will, is a massive problem in the sector, and it's probably never going to go away. because everyone's salespeople and they want to be optimistic, and the directors in the business, and all that happens is the managers then kick it up to the directors. The directors think this is happening, and then all of a sudden the shit rolls downhill. And it's just because then the directors might commit to the board. Yep, forecast that. And then all of a sudden you miss what you forecast everything. So yeah, it's better to be very critical of your own pipeline and ask others, advice on it.
Yeah, 100%. It's always better to go to your manager. If you're a recruiter listening, better to go to your manager going, I can pipeline or forecast for next month one deal with this client, pretty much 100%. And then you do 2-3 deals. Because I've been that person, I'm sure you have, when you say to your manager, this is my pipeline, then next month you blank, or
I still am.
don't do that.
Yeah, 100%. But also, this is another thing with process, right? So when we're doing our one-to-ones on a weekly, monthly basis during the week, we're constantly touching to find out where we are, doing desk MOTs, looking at where things are. Oh yeah, I'll do 2 deals this month. Okay, how? Because you've had one client meeting, you've got no jobs on at the moment. Yeah, I've got something up my sleeve, don't worry. We haven't. It's actually being realistic with yourself and the people around you. Because again, if we're working to a fundamental set of targets or stats, you can predict that you're going to do that. You know what the pipeline is. Now, don't get me wrong, you might put in a client 1 month and then they're just always going to, and you could be like, well, I could sort of bank that client's going to give me a deal a month. It's like, where's your new business every month? Where's that? Because that's not going to come. And if you think that you've got one client now and you can sit with your feet up on the desk because you've got a client that's going to, get you through, then you're very much mistaken.
100%.
Because as soon as that client dries up or the market changes, you're back in square one.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Patrick. Thank you very much for coming on. What I'm trying to do for every episode is just finish off with my killer question at the end, which is for listeners listening, whether they are a trainee, a recruiter, a manager, a business founder, or whether they're looking to set up their own business, what's one thing they can take away from today's session to become 1% better?
Structure and process.
Structure and process.
Understand what you need to do to be successful and what the daily target should be, and hit them. It's really straightforward. Have non-negotiables, and they're called non-negotiable for reasons that are maybe negotiable. That's all right. This is what you need to do on a daily basis, and hit it. And if you're doing the right activities every day, eventually things will start falling into place, and you'll build a much better business than the people that are, but I'm going to just, do whatever I can by hook or by crook to go around and do a deal. So people may be successful for a period of time. Sustainable success and growth in a business is down to just ruthlessly repeating the right tasks. And if you do that, you'll be successful. So my 1% better is get a process and stick to it.
I love it. I say to every single person I work with, trust the process. Trust the process. If you look at every hyper successful person, every super successful athlete, etc., they have a process, they stick to it, they trust it, and it works.
Yeah, that's it. That's my and then if you're following a process, you might be, again, every day you're going to get better. So review what you did. And we're talking about 1% better. How can I get a little bit better at that every day? Practice doing repeating the same, repeating, and getting better and better and better. So from day one to the end of the 3rd month, the difference is going to be staggering, and you're going to be in a position after 3 months or so to really go on if you're just compounding the improvements every day. So don't just, and this is the problem. So one last thing, I know we've run over quite a lot, but the problem is you can be doing the right things, like I was when I first started, not understanding why you're doing it, not looking to improve on those. So not really reviewing it. Do the right tasks and review where improvements can be made every day. Okay, how did I ask the right question in that call? Is there a way of, asking more open? Was it a closed question or an open question? Did I could I summarize better? Is there a way that I can actually sell our offerings slightly better? improving on learning every day how to get a little tiny bit better, baby steps, and in the long run that will lead to major success.
Love it. Patrick, thank you very much.
No worries. Cheers, Charles. Thanks for your time, mate.